Hello and welcome to the Genuine Learning blog. My name is Melisa Galasso, and today we're going to talk about a proposal which is coming out of the PCAOB. And this is a request for public comment with respect to their standard setting. So we're going to look at what are some of the ideas the PCAOB has with respect to their next steps in standard setting. So this was issued on June 23rd of 2026, and they previously had requested feedback on a strategic plan. And with that information, they're now using this feedback to gain an understanding around the standard setting agenda. So there are three things that they're focused on in this proposal. The first one is updating the standard setting and research agendas. What should they work on next? And so really important consideration, but also revisiting their approach to standard setting. How should they be going through this process? And then if you've been following some of the work that the SEC is doing, they have proposed semi-annual in lieu of quarterly reporting. And so taking a look at what are the impact potentially there. So on March 31st of 2026, the PCAOB issued a request for public comment on their strategic priorities. And they've considered that feedback, and that is why they are doing this request for comment to get more information specifically about the standard setting and research agendas. And the areas of focus that were identified from the original proposal were data and technology, no surprise, fraud, which is consistent something that the AICPA is looking at, critical audit matters, NOCLAR, non-compliance with laws and regulations, firm and engagement performance metrics, and auditor independence. And they're asking a number of questions here. Do you believe that the PCAOB should focus standard setting on these particular areas? How would you prioritize them? Do you have any views not previously shared regarding the scope and objective of the standard setting process? In areas where you believe issuing staff guidance would be preferable to amending standards, what guidance would you suggest? So again, do we not need a new standard, but maybe just some more understanding? In addition to performing standard setting or research in the particular focus, should the PCAOB undertake modernization of the remaining interim PCAOB standards? So again, going concern, inventory, use of service organization. So again, the things that they kind of carried forward. They had heard some concerns about the accelerated pace of standard setting and the length of comment periods. So they'd like to know more about what would be the proper length. They would also know when looking at effective dates, what factors would be relevant. And then when prioritizing potential standard setting or research projects, including those outlined in this session, how and to what degree should the PCAOB consider economic benefits, cost, competitive effects, and unintended consequences? So as you can probably imagine, that is a lot of things that people are interested in. Pace of change is an issue. What we should work on, the AICPA puts out these strategic plans. The FASB does their invitations to comment with respect to agenda consultations. So now it's the PCAOB's turn. In addition, they are soliciting further input regarding certain aspects of potential PCAOB standard setting, specifically with respect to AI, and additional detailed input around how to calibrate the scope of the activities. So again, a number of questions in this area. Should the PCAOB pursue standard setting and research to address the matters identified in terms of the impact of the use of AI on identifying and assessing risk, auditing internal controls, and determining what is sufficient appropriate evidence? And obviously, with the pace of change in the light of rapid events in data and technology, including AI, are there additional matters that they should consider? And then are there specific areas of the PCAOB's current standards that believe are not a fit for the AI environment? They're also looking at digital assets. So this from the previous strategic plan, some commenters recommended that the PCAOB look at digital assets. And so again, that's something that their internal group also decided that would be relevant here, particularly around access, ownership, control, and testing. However, there was no consensus. So the question that they're raising here, do you believe there is a need for the PCAOB to address this topic? If so, should the PCAOB pursue standard setting and research, or are these better addressed through issuance of staff guidance? So trying to better understand what would make sense here. In addition to the agenda, they are looking at their approach to standard setting. And so they are weighing whether to develop a conceptual framework. This is something that the AICPA has. We also have this at the FASB, where they have a basis for how they set standards. And so a conceptual framework work would promote greater transparency, consistency, and efficient use. We don't want different boards to have different flavors. And so we have a framework to set them aside. Within a conceptual framework, we could articulate a structured, principles-based approach to standard setting, similar to those of other accounting and auditing standard setters. So again, they're thinking about this. So their commenters indicated that they would value more transparency about the projects. What are the considerations for when something gets on the agenda? So they're considering establishing explicit criteria for identifying and prioritizing projects based on the evidence from the stakeholders and the activities, investors, etc. So they're asking questions about, should they develop and adopt a conceptual framework? What qualitative characteristics should be considered? How should that be integrated into the PCAOB standard setting process? And then again, when they think about this, should a conceptual framework include criteria or facts for evaluating economic benefits, costs, competitive effects, etc.? And should the conceptual framework address alignment of PCAOB standards with those of other standard setters? In addition, they are looking at that SEC proposal. Back in May of 2026, the SEC said potentially the option of filing semi-annual in lieu of quarterly. And so they have some questions about what would be the impact on the auditor. So auditors currently can provide negative assurance regarding subsequent changes in the specified financial statements that as of a date less than 135 days from the end of the most recent period. So in light of the proposed, should the rules regarding the age of financials be adjusted? And then if narrow, conforming amendments related to the negative assurance were to be considered, should they, for example, permit the auditor to provide such negative assurance as of a date subsequent to the end of the most recent audited or reviewed and prior to the next? So they're trying to figure out what's the right pace. And then again, there are limited to reporting procedures performed and findings obtained, and may not provide negative assurance as to subsequent changes in specified statements as of a date 135 days or more subsequent to the end of a period. So if this is going to be amended, what would be the right period, right? So they're asking some questions. So if this is something that interests you, comments are due August 7th, and you can do that either by email or by visiting the PCAOB's website. And you want to make sure that you're responding to the request for public comment on PCAOB standard setting. All right, well, that is a wrap on this week's blog. I look forward to seeing you on a future blog. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.